Governor Newsom delivered an impassioned primetime rebuke of President Trump, accusing him of orchestrating a stepped-up assault on democracy and calling on Americans to rise up against authoritarianism.
If some of us could be snatched off the streets without a warrant, based only on suspicion or skin color, then none of us are safe. Authoritarian regimes begin by targeting people who are least able to defend themselves, but they do not stop there. Trump and his loyalists, they thrive on division because it allows them to take more power and exert even more control. And by the way, Trump, he's not opposed to lawlessness and violence as long as it serves him. What more evidence do we need than January 6th? This is a president who in just over 140 days has fired government watchdogs that could hold him accountable for corruption and fraud. He's declared a war on culture, on history, on science, on knowledge itself. Databases, quite literally, are vanishing. He's delegitimizing news organizations, and he's assaulting the First Amendment. And the threat of defunding them, at threat, he's dictating what universities themselves can teach. He's targeting law firms and the judicial branch that are the foundations of an orderly and civil society. What Donald Trump wants most is your fealty, your silence to be complicit in this moment. Do not give in to him.
And my panel is back. Dave Weigel, we talked a lot with all of you at this table about the pleading among Democratic voters, among Democrats across the country for their leaders to do something, to fight back. Gavin Newsom was handed an opportunity, and he's trying to use it to the best of his ability, not just with the content of what he said, but just even the way that he delivered it. It was kind of a state of the state address, speaking directly to camera, to members of the resistance.
Yes, and that is exactly what Democrats want to hear. I was in New Jersey and New York the last few days. We're primary in New Jersey yesterday, primary coming up in New York in 2 weeks. This is how they're talking about Trump universally. The candidates who were scanned as more moderate in these states and the candidates who were scanned as more left-wing. Andrew Cuomo is calling what Trump's doing authoritarian. And he obviously clashed with Trump when he was governor, and that's a lot of what his campaign is about. But what they're trying to do in real time is because they're very aware, every Democrat's very aware, that footage you saw in LA even a couple days ago is going to be in campaign ads for the next 4 years. I'm still seeing the same B-roll of stuff burning in Minneapolis and ads in rural South Carolina 5 years later. They know that's going to happen. They are trying to win an argument right now that says this is not necessary, that Donald Trump could have handled this differently, and he's trying to accelerate this for that imagery, for those purposes, for political gain. And the only thing that this is rested on, whether this will work, is in 2020, that is how a lot of voters reacted. What Trump is doing is not, they're polling after, especially the incident outside the White House, holding the Bible up in front of the church. Most Americans said he was making the tensions worse. He was responsible for the riots getting worse. In Portland, same sort of thing happened. Different topic, because that was about racial justice. This is about non-citizens. But that is where they're all trying to get. And the Democrats who are taking some criticism, because why are you not just condemning the riots and going? They just don't think they can. They need to say this is authoritarian and not necessary.
Yeah. And then just back on Newsom, the way that he is doing this, again, what he is saying and the way that he is doing it, not just in that speech, but also on social media, TikTok alone, the beginning of this month, which was like last week, he had 603 followers on TikTok. Now he has 1 million followers, and he's got 603,000 June 4th, and now he has 1 million. So he's almost doubled his followers, and his videos have gotten hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions of views.
I think when there are inflection points, usually, where people feel that Trump has kind of done something that they consider particularly problematic, there's always an entry point for a Democrat to kind of become the face of the resistance on that issue. Cory Booker had his moment, for example. And so we've seen Democrats able to make a moment out of these opportunities. I think Governor Newsom is definitely having a moment. The question is it sustainable? Because we're already seeing people now saying, well, Cory Booker had a moment, but then he had some votes for Trump nominees or policies that Democrats wanted him to vote no, and he voted yes, and now they're frustrated with him again. Hakeem Jeffries, same thing. Chuck Schumer, same thing. So the question for, Governor Newsom politically is how can he sustain this? And the question for the Democratic Party is how can they create some consistency where people don't just see someone having a good moment, that Democratic voters say, we think the party is on the right trajectory to truly meet the moment on a permanent basis. And we know that there are a lot of members of the Democratic base who don't have that confidence yet.
Well, I mean, and Newsom also has a podcast where he has been talking to some pretty controversial figures, people who are considered controversial among those Democratic voters. And so he's kind of been straddling all sides of this politically.
Yeah.
But in politics, it's about meeting the moment.
It is about meeting the moment. I would also say some of the credit for Governor Newsom's surge in visibility, shall we say, is owed to Donald Trump.
100%.
Right? And so if Trump, wants Newsom to be the Democratic nominee in 28, he thinks that's who Republicans should run against. I mean, I think that there's some of that potentially going on as well. I mean, he clearly wants to pick this fight with him. And, Trump also kind of delights in seeing his enemies attempt to take him on and not succeed, right? And I think you're seeing an element of that as well, because I think it's worth noting that Newsom also hasn't been successful in the courts so far to the extent he would probably like to be, and I think that is really one of the big questions here for Democrats. I mean, what their base is demanding of them is that they do something that so far the system is not allowing them to do, and Democrats are working within the systems that are democratic systems that they so vociferously depend on. And so this is, this enormous tension here, and this is why Trump's able to kind of exploit the Democrats or agitators or whoever they are that are going outside the system, because Trump can look at that and say, look at this is violent, this is wrong, this is horrible. But on the flip side, the systems that are in place have not so far given Democrats what they want.
The Trump administration faces an afternoon deadline to respond to California's lawsuit over the use of U.S. military troops in downtown Los Angeles. The state is trying to block the White House from using the Marines and National Guard troops in protests over immigration raids. President Trump mobilized the military against the objections of the state's governor, Gavin Newsom, who is accusing the president of, quote, a brazen abuse of power, close quote. Listen to this.
This is about all of us. This is about you. California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes.
All right, joining us now, CNN senior political and global affairs commentator Rahm Emanuel. He's a former U.S. ambassador to Japan, a former Obama White House chief of staff, former mayor of Chicago as well. Rahm, thanks for being here. Do you agree with Governor Newsom? Has the White House trampled California's rights by mobilizing U.S. military troops without their consent?
Yeah, Wolf, I want to draw back on one experience when I was mayor. Chicago in 2012 had the largest NATO meeting in the history of NATO. 75 countries, close to 75 countries, because other countries participated. We had 50,000 people on the street. We did security in collaboration and cooperation with the federal government, not in confrontation. And people were able to protest without provoking, very little, if any, violence at all. Here, the Trump administration is not trying to cooperate, not trying to collaborate, is trying to confront not the protesters, but also the state government. This was a confrontation driven by the Trump administration. So I think Gavin Newsom is right, not only to sue, but to call it out, because it starts the United States down a road we haven't ever gone before. Now, you have a right to protest, you don't have a right to provoke. That is also true for the government. You have a responsibility to protect, not to provoke, and this was a purposeful set of confrontation, and the governor was correct to call and say, we're first, but not last.
You and I have known each other, Rahm, you and I have known each other for a long time. You know politics well. Does President Trump benefit from this showdown between him and California Governor Newsom?
Yes and no. And what I mean by that answer is, on the short term, there may be a yes, but if this all of a sudden becomes a violent act where the government, in sense, one citizen or one individual is physically hurt, then this could clearly, from just a pure political standpoint, flip on the president. Remember the other piece of what the president's trying to do. He doesn't want anybody to look at what, Elon Musk called the ugly bill. He doesn't want to debate about all the children that are being kicked off of Medicaid. So there's also a distraction element to this. So on a short term, I would say there's a piece of that politically that you could say benefits the president, but it can easily flip on the other side in the same way that would be true for the state. And politics, and then no matter what anybody says, is not far, if not center, for either the president or what they're trying to do, or for the mayor and the governor in that situation. But so I wouldn't answer it as simply, it's good politics, because I actually think there's an element of this where the swing voters, independent voters, are not going to like the idea of Marines and the militarization and the constant militarization, constant confrontation on the streets.